It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 31, looking at the players of the 2025 African Cup. This episode is looking at the players of Gabon. Part 2, the selections. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and this is a continuation of Series 31 on the players of the 2025 African Cup. This episode is part 2 of our coverage of Gabon's players. The final roster is released and we're looking at the selections of Gabon. In part 1, we compiled a list on the players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. That was based mostly on their participation from after the 2023 African Cup. They didn't actually play in that, so we'll say from March of 2024 up until the October 2025 games. We considered a few other factors as well, and we also gave some biographical / career information on the main players to help you to get to know them better. In part 2 here, our focus is on the selections, especially the final selections. Before we move on, though, we want to let you know that in the springtime of 2026, probably April, we will start producing episodes for the 2026 World Cup, which of course takes place in the summer of 2026. So keep an eye out for that, or better yet, subscribe to the channel and it'll notify you when the episodes come out. All right, this mediacast is divided into 3 sections. Just like in part 1, the section 1 is devoted to team information. Section 2 is the main part of the mediacast. We review the list that we compiled in part 1, and we'll let you know who made the preliminary and final squad. We also tried to predict the starters, and we actually took steps towards that in part 1 by providing a narrative of each position over the period. We'll summarize that narrative by letting you know who we thought the starters would be. We didn't actually talk about that in part 1, but we did make notes on it. So then we'll examine the lineup in games played after, or the one game played after October 2025 to see if it gives us any further clues as to who will start. And finally, we'll revise our predictions of the starters there. All right, in section 3, we will do our spotlight review, a quick run through the main players who made it and didn't make the squad, and our predicted starters. And we'll also review surprise selections and non-selections on the squad, as well as any new players making the final squad. And finally, we will update on injuries. Okay, let's jump right in to section 1, some information on the team. So in part 1, we looked at the club affiliation of players. Club affiliations of players, the games they played over the recent period, and their preferred formations. This section is shorter than in part 1. We're just focusing on what the team published. Teams were required to submit a preliminary roster of up to 55 players to CAF, the organizers of the tournament. That's kind of Africa's version of FIFA. For the 2023 African Cup, CAF made it easy on us by publishing the list. However, some teams didn't like that. They felt it had some negative effects. So this time, CAF did not publish them, and it was up to the teams as to whether they released that information or not. I used Google's AI, the Gemini there, to get the 55-man roster. But in the process of doing so, I became a bit doubtful about its sourcing and accuracy. To be honest, though, that was really just in a few of the finer details, especially not the starting squad, but the some of the preliminary squad members. Overall, I think what I ended up with was fairly accurate. At the risk of a few mistakes, we are going to use the information here. The final rosters, on the other hand, though, are very accurate. All right, so teams were allowed to bring 28 players to the tournament, and Gabon did that. 28 players in the final squad. That means they would have to cut 27 players from the preliminary squad. And that's that. Before we move on to section 2 and see who those players were, let's take a look at the games played after October 2025. Well, for Gabon, that was the World Cup 2076 qualifying playoffs in Africa. So the four best second place finishers there proceeded to a playoff, a semi-final and a final, and one of them would emerge from out of Africa there. The game that Gabon played was on November 13th, so that would have been the semi-final, and it was against Nigeria. Pretty exciting. That ended in a 1-1 draw, but then Nigeria basically demolished them in extra time, scoring 3 goals, so winning 4-1. So Gabon knocked out at the semi-final stage, but still a very good result overall for Gabon there. And the manager was not fired, unlike the Cameroon manager who was fired after losing the semi-final playoff there. Okay, so that is the only game they played. They didn't schedule a warm-up. Only a few teams actually did schedule warm-ups in December. And that's the end of part 1. So we're going to move on to our main business, part 2, taking a look at the candidates. And we'll begin with the manager there. In part 1, we used the opportunity of the manager to talk about the general fortunes of the team over the past few years, and then the manager's success or failures in those campaigns. Monuma here, Thierry Monuma, came in late in 2023. That was after the previous manager had been fired for not qualifying for the 2023 African Cup. That cup played in 2024. So Monuma, though, did get them to this tournament, the 2025 African Cup, and as we saw, had a pretty good World Cup qualification there, reaching the final playoffs. So Monuma remains their manager here and will guide them through the tournament. We'll kind of view him as a successful selection there. Okay, let's start with the players and go to the goalkeepers first. And here we had a definite candidate in Lois Mbaba. And just a word, if you're looking at the YouTube graphics there, if their name is in orange script, like Lois Mbaba, that means they came in during this period, so sometime in 2024 or later. If their name is in black, it means they have been through a tournament. And if their name is in light grey, it means they have not been through a tournament. Dark grey means they are basically off the national squad there. We have all 4 of those represented in our goalkeepers here. Anyway, keep that in mind. So, definite candidate Lois Mbaba selected. The likely candidate, Francois Bakale, also selected for the final squad. We had 3 candidates at the possible level. The first one, Junior Fotso Nubi, not even making the preliminary squad there. He had made the African Cup in 2021. The second one, Anse Ngubi Demba, was selected for the final squad. And the other possible candidate, Lucif Mungwenu, also not even making the preliminary squad there. The goalkeeper we have on the list, seemingly off the squad, Anthony Mfa Mezui, did actually make the preliminary squad there, but not the final cut there. All right, let's see if we have any new candidates. We do not. And so we'll talk about our predictions or what we were thinking at the end of part 1. And what we were thinking was Lois Mbaba was in good command of the position from September 2024, and he started all of the fall 2025 matches, all 4 of those matches. So we considered him a likely starter, pretty conservative. We'd say close to definite there. And we considered the backups to be Bekale or Nubi. We actually gave Nubi the edge there because he had started 2 games that Mbaba was out for over the period, whereas Bekale had just started 1. We looked at the November game and we see Mbaba started that one as well. So we are going to move him up to definite there. And in terms of backup, though, Nubi was not selected for the final squad. So it looks like Bekale kind of is the backup keeper by default there. So we are going to say we're going to be a bit bold and say that Mbaba is the definite starter there. And rather than considering Bekale a possible starter, we consider him the first backup. We really don't think he would start the game there. So we won't give him any stars. And by the way, the 3 stars means we think he's a definite starter. 2 will mean likely and 1 will mean possible there. Okay, that's it for goalkeepers. Let's move on to the defense and central defenders. We have 2 definite candidates here. The first one is Bruno Akuelmanga, still going strong at 37 years old, and he was selected for the final squad. And the second one also selected, that is Aaron Apidangoye, making the squad. We have 2 candidates at the likely level. The first one, Michel Mbula, overcoming injury there to be selected. We'll talk about that in section 3 in more detail, because we do see a potential problem there. The other likely candidate, Mick Omfia, also selected for the final squad. So too was our first possible candidate, Alex Muketu Musuanda. Let me try that again. Alex Muketu Musunda. I'll have to see how they call him in the cup there. Because I'm sure that's too much of a mouthful for the announcer to say every time. Anyway, so our first 5 candidates on our list selected. The other possible candidate, Yanis Mbemba, only made the preliminary squad there. And our 2 possible but unlikely candidates not even making the preliminary squad. That is Matteo Musa and Larry Ekwa, or yeah, a bit of confusion as to what his name is. No, it is Larry Ekwa. I'm going to replace it there. Larry Jonathan Ekwa. I had it wrong in part 1 there. All right, we had also a player seemingly off the squad, Sydney Obisa, but he was selected at least for the preliminary squad there. And we have 2 new candidates here, actually one of them making the final squad. And I need to correct myself. It's 3 new candidates, one of them making the final squad. The one making it is Jonathan Domarcolino. That's kind of a family name that is big in Gabon in soccer. Domarcolino. Well, we'll introduce him right away here because he did make the squad. The second candidate here, Johan Wachter, selected for the preliminary squad but didn't make the final cut. And I'll just take this opportunity to say that these are not necessarily new players. Johan Wachter was part of the 2017 African Cup, but they're new being added to the list here. We didn't put players on the list who had not appeared for the team over the past 2 years. So Johan Wachter kind of coming back in from the cold here. Well, at least to the preliminary squad. The last one is Faustin Senghor. and Faustin Senghor just making the preliminary squad also. But let's look at the player making the final squad. It's Jonathan Do Marcolino, and he's just 19 years old. His first and only appearance was on the bench shortly before the tournament in November 2025, so still no caps for the national team for him. And he plays for Reims B team in France there, currently on loan to a smaller team, actually. And as I said, his family heavily involved with the national team. His older brother, Alan, we're going to meet a bit later. His uncle, Fabrice, also played 57 caps. And his father was a manager on top of it, so Do Marcolino well inserted into the soccer scene there. Okay, those are all the candidates. Let's go back and look at the potential starters here. So at the end of part one, we had Bruno Manga as a definite starter. His name is pretty much glued onto the starting sheet there. Mick Omphia was his partner in 5 of the last 6 games, so we have him as a possible starter. But a bit of a deeper dive into that shows that Michael Mbula was out injured for those games, and Alex, I'm going to call him Alex Musunda, was not being called up during those games, but he was named to the final squad. So we think it's a bit more complex than just Mick Omphia having kind of a free passage to a start there. So when we look at the November game, it makes it even more complicated because it was none of these 3 players. It was Aaron Apindangoye, who had once been a regular partner of Ekuel Manga, getting the start in that game. So actually, at this point, we would probably favour Apindangoye over Mick Omphia, and that will be our final prediction on that. We're going to put Bruno Ekuel Manga as a 3 stars, as a definite starter there. And we're going to give 1 star as a possible starter to Apindangoye and 1 star to Mick Omphia. But to be honest, we wouldn't be surprised to see one of the other ones. Actually, Mbula, we would be a bit surprised because we think he's probably not fully over his injury. But Musunda, we're really not sure why he was left out of the fall games, but here he is named to the final squad, so he could be back in the picture. Okay, let's move on to left backs, and we have a definite candidate in Jacques Ikome. Jack Ikome, and he was selected for the squad. And our likely candidate, Johan Obiang, also selected for the squad. So 2 good candidates there for starters. And we don't have any new candidates here, so those are the only ones. Over the course of the period, Obiang seemed to kind of cede the starting position to Jacques Ikome, but we're not sure. It may be still under contention. However, the playoff games do suggest that Ikome does have the edge now because he started that playoff game. So at the end of part 1, we had thought Ikome was slightly more likely than Obiang, and now we're even more kind of confident in that opinion. So we're going to give 2 stars to Jacques Ikome there, and 1 star to Johan Obiang. Although we wouldn't be surprised if Obiang started also, but in a different position on the field there. Maybe central defense. I think I've also seen him as a left attacking midfielder too. Okay, so just the 2 candidates for left back. Let's move on over to the right side, and here's where we meet the Oyono twins. Both of them definite candidates, Anthony and Jeremy. You can see by the graphics that Anthony has tournament experience, whereas Jeremy doesn't. And at the end of part 1, we did kind of give the edge to Anthony Oyono there. Between the 2 of them, though, they've been covering the position fully over the last little while, but Anthony has started a bit more than Jeremy. Anthony also started the November playoff, so that just reinforces our thinking. I just wonder if I forgot to introduce a couple of new candidates, and I did. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I will finish the prediction here because none of the new candidates, made the final squad. So we're going to give 2 stars to Anthony Oyono as a likely starter and 1 to Jeremy Oyono, who possibly could start. All right, and sorry for going out of order there, but let's look at our 3 new candidates. Again, the first one is not new at all. It's a veteran of the team, Lloyd Paloon. He was a starter back in the 2021 African Cup, but he didn't make the final squad there. Lloyd Paloon, 37 years old now. The second one was Yanis Ungakutu. Yanis Ungakutu, also just making the preliminary squad there. And the other one is actually not necessarily a right back. We actually don't know. He hasn't played enough for us to know what kind of a defender he is, but we add him to the list here. It is Anthony Enriquez. Anthony Enriquez, just 22 years old there. So 23 years old, sorry, may come onto the squad in the future. All right, so there we go, and I'm way off base here because I forgot to even say that both Anthony Oyono and Jeremy Oyono were selected for the squad, but I suppose you figured that out, and we'll just put the stars back. 2 stars for Anthony and 1 for Jeremy, and then we'll be ready to move on to the midfield. And here we go with defensive midfielders. So we have a definite candidate here in Mario Lamina, who was selected for the final squad, overcoming a bit of injury there. So we'll talk about that in section 3. I'll give the details on that. But the fact he was selected suggests that they have faith that he will overcome that if he hasn't already. Okay, no candidates at the likely level. At the possible level, we have Serge Junior Nguali, who only made the preliminary squad. And then we have Clench Lufilu. Clench Lufilu, maybe known as Ruben Ufalu, I think, or Clash Lufilu. I've seen a few different names there. He did make the squad, so maybe we'll find out in the cup exactly what he's called. We had 2 possible but unlikely candidates. The first one, Medwin Biteg, or Bitege, just making the preliminary squad, and the other one, Shorla Aboge, not even making the preliminary squad there. However, we have a couple of new candidates, and one of them did make the preliminary squad, and that is Samake Nze Bagnama, who we will introduce shortly, because we said we would if some of these players that we didn't introduce last time make the squad. First, I'll tell you, though, that the other candidate making the preliminary squad, at least, is Brimo Nziengui. Brimo Nziengui just making the preliminary squad there. Let me tell you about Samake Nze Bagnama. He has first showed up in March of 2025, so actually we should have had him on the list. I'm not sure why we didn't. Got his first cap in March 2025 and did start 1 of their 8 games over the period we examined. He was also subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 3 and not selected for 1 other. So we had him as a possible candidate. Actually, with that level of participation, we might have had him as a likely candidate. I really don't know how he missed our radar there. But anyway, we're introducing him as a new candidate here. So 5 caps for him. And he's 23 years old. And he actually plays in Ivory Coast for one of the bigger teams in Ivory Coast, Stade Abidjan, there since 2025. He was in Gabon before that. So Samake Nzebagnama making the squad there. And before we talk about possible starters, we're going to actually introduce the central midfielders because we kind of treat them as one. So I'll just review the candidates or the successful candidates we have so far. Mario Lamina, Clench Lufilu, and newcomer Samake Nzebagnama, and not as much a newcomer as all that. Okay, central midfielders. We had a definite candidate in Gwailor Kanga, and he was selected for the final squad. And so too are our two likely candidates, Andre Biogo Poko, making the final cut, and Didier Ndong. All of these players in their 30s kind of have been with Gabon for quite a long time. And I'll just check and see if we have new candidates. We do have one new candidate. It is Levi Mandinda, also a fairly experienced player in his 30s, but only making the preliminary squad. Excuse me, Levi Mandinda there. Okay, so now we do have all of our candidates, 6 of them in the midfield, and they often do use a 3-man midfield. So let's see what we thought. Well, it is a 3-man midfield, and it's often the same 3 players when they're available. So we have here as likely starters Gwailor Kanga, Didier Ndong, and Mario Lamina, probably in that order. But most of the time when they're out, it's usually because of injury or something like that. Kanga actually was the most steady member of the partnership, but for some reason he was not called up for the November playoff game. So we're a bit surprised in such an important game there. But we're not sure the reason he wasn't called up. Replacing him was the right attacking midfielder Royce Openda. We'll meet him a bit later. We were very surprised by that. Royce Openda was stepping in there for his debut game, but he was flanked by our regulars Didier Ndong and Mario Lamina. We do think Kanga will return to the spot, but that was a lot of trust to place in Openda for an important game in the center of the central midfield. So perhaps they are regarding him highly, and he might be in the mix. It's too soon to tell, though, because November was his first game there. And we will meet him later. We'll introduce him. As far as starters go, we're going to stick with what we got here and put a likely starter beside all 3 of them: Mario Lamina, Gwailor Kanga, and Didier Ndong there. Okay, let's move on up. We're going to kind of pause at left and right midfielders to see if we have any candidates there. We actually do have no left midfielders, but a right midfielder. We did have one on our list in part 1. It was Teddy Averland, and he was selected for the squad. There we had him just as a possible candidate, and there he is successfully making the squad. Okay, probably playing in the central midfielders. He started 2 of their games over the period there. Okay, let's move on up to attacking midfielders, and we begin on the left side, and we start with definite candidate Dennis Bouanga, and no surprise that he was selected for the final squad. I think he was the top scorer in World Cup qualifying there. Beyond that, though, we only have one other candidate, and he's down at the possible but unlikely level, Yohan Nani Nono. And Nono not selected for the final squad there, or actually not even selected for the preliminary squad. But we do have a new candidate who was selected for the preliminary squad. Davy Mayungu. Davy Mayungu played for Gabon way back in 2013 and 14, and so he's really coming in from a long absence. Well, not really coming in, just making the preliminary squad there. Okay, that is it for the candidates. Let's look and see what we got. Well, of course, Dennis Buanga, a likely starter over here. I mean, given his scoring in World Cup qualifying, we would almost put him at the definite level, but he sometimes starts as a forward and started 13 of their 18 games, so a little more than two-thirds, but doesn't necessarily start all the time. Having said that, we would be shocked if he didn't start in the cup here. Backing him up is players kind of out of position players, so we're going to meet them soon. They're both right attacking midfielders, Jim Alavina and Xavi Babika. Seem to be the backup players. At the end of part one, we had Dennis Buanga as the likely starter, and those two, Alavina and Babika, as possible starters. But we see that in the November game, it was Buanga starting. So I think we're able to move him up to a definite starter. I think it would be actually a bit surprising if he didn't. But there is a slight chance of him starting as a forward. Which we'll see when we get to the forward lines. And rather than seeing Alavina and Babika as possible starters, we're going to move them down to just first backups in the case that Buanga is unavailable. So we don't think there's any possibility of them kind of starting ahead of him there. Okay, let's go over to right attackers. That's where we meet both of these players. And we have Jim Alavina at the likely level over here. And he did overcome injury to earn selection for the squad. But again, we're a little concerned about that injury, which we'll talk about in part two. Oh, sorry, what am I talking about? In section 3. We'll talk about that. We had two candidates at the possible level. The first one, David Sambisa, just making the preliminary squad there. We were a bit confused about him. He's coded as a left back, but he was kind of playing more as a right attacking midfielder. Anyway, he didn't make the squad there. And Xavi Babika, the other candidate at the possible level, was selected for the final squad. But he too, situation very similar to Jim Alavina. I might as well say it here, that they are recovered from their injury, but it doesn't look like they've built up enough fitness to be a starter there. So again, we'll give more details in section 3. Here we do have a new candidate, and we've mentioned him before. It is Royce Openda, surprisingly starting in the midfield in his debut game for the squad, and was selected for the final squad. Let's meet him here. His first and only appearance was the start in the World Cup qualifying semi-final game there in November 2025. So wow. So just that one cap for the national team. He's 23 years old. Good club affiliation. He recently moved to Bordeaux in France since 2025. Prior to that was with a fairly small club in France, Chambly Oisy there, but he was also with Lorient, their B team before that. So a pretty big move up there, and a pretty big move on the field there with Royce Openda. Let's talk about starters over here. We have just Jim Alavina as a possible starter, and I'll tell you why. He was the most prominent player in the position over the period, but that only means he started about a third of the games, although he, like many others in the midfield here, also started in other positions. To show how unsettled it was 4 different players starting the 4 games in the fall of 2025 there. And then a fifth player was added in November when, unexpectedly for us at least, central midfielder Diogo Poco started as the right attacking midfielder in the November playoff game. Diogo Poco having started only 2 of their 18 games over the period. Alavena was actually out injured there. So Alavina still seems to be building fitness after an injury. We honestly don't think either he or Babika will be in shape to play a full game there. So we're going to kind of predict that they won't be starters over here. However, we have no idea who will be. For us, Diogo Poco was a bit of a surprise, and they've had various different players in the position. So we have to say here that we can't define a possible starter over here. So we're going to leave it blank. Okay, let's move on to the central attacking midfield. And this position was only used once over their 18 games from March 2024 to October 2025. So, yeah, not really a position they use very much, but we do have a couple of candidates here. The first one was at the likely level, and it was Noha Lamina, brother of Mario Lamina, much younger brother. But nevertheless, it was a bit of a surprise that he was not selected for the final squad there. Again, we had him as a likely candidate. The possible candidate, though, Eric Bokum, was selected for the final squad. But the possible but unlikely candidate, Van Christopher Mobili, not even making the preliminary squad. We do have a new candidate. It's another comeback player. He was in the 2021 African Cup, Louis Amika, but he only making the preliminary squad there. So we just have Eric Bokum over here. The one game they did use this position in, he actually did start. But they didn't use the formation that has this position in the November playoff game. They used a 4-3-3 formation with 3 midfielders straight across. That's their preferred formation. So our prediction over here is actually that they're not going to use the position. So we say that likely to definite. We think that they won't use this position. That requires a 4-2-3-1 formation, by the way. Okay, so that is it for the midfield. We're going to move on upfield to the forwards. I don't think we have any secondary strikers to cover, so we move right to the centre forwards here. And then at the definite level, we have Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Yes, we'll talk about that because it's a bit of a comeback story for him. No candidates at the likely level. And here is where we meet Alan Domarcolino of the ubiquitous Domarcolino family. However, he just made the preliminary squad there, so his less experienced brother getting the call-up ahead of him. I wonder what the family discussion at the table will be about that. The second of the possible candidates, Edlin Randy Esangmatuti, was selected for the final squad. And I will hope for a shorter name from the announcers there. And then the third possible candidate, Brian Mayo Ngua, not even making the preliminary squad there. However, both of our possible but unlikely players did make the cut. Did make the preliminary squad. The first one, Rodi Ifage. I'm not really sure how to pronounce a name that ends in GHE. So this is EFFAGHE. We've had a couple of those, and I'm going to say Rodi Ifage. but I'm honestly not sure if I'm getting that right. He did make the preliminary squad, so did Orfe Mbina, and then so did seemingly off the squad Axel May. Uh, make the preliminary squad. He was unattached to a club though, so we thought his chances are pretty low of making the squad. We have several new candidates here, 6 in all, but only the first of them um, actually selected for the final squad, and that is Malik Avunu. So again, this is another player who is not on our list because he hadn't appeared in 2024 or 25. In fact, he last appeared for the national team way back in November 2019. So for some of these players, they've really kind of dug through the files and pulled out some dusty files. I'm sure Ivuna wouldn't like me like that analogy, but anyway, Ivuna played for Gabon from 2012 to 2019, and he had 34 caps and an impressive 12 goals, and he's actually just 33 years old, which is not old considering he was on the team last 6 years ago. He is now playing in Gabon for Manga Sport, but he has played in other countries quite extensively, actually, in Egypt, Portugal, China, and Turkey, and Morocco. So a pretty good or a pretty long resume for him. None of those really big teams, though. I would say Wydad Casablanca in Morocco and Al Ali in Egypt from 2013 to 16 would be the biggest ones there. And he was part of the squad for the 2015 and 2017 African Cups, actually a starter in both of those. But as I said, last appeared on the bench in November 2019. So Malik Avuna coming in, and that only makes 3 forwards. So still a bit thin up front here. Let's just go over the names of the 5 other candidates who made the preliminary squad. The first one, Vino Labas. And then we have Byron Otenda, Jeremy Ubanet, or Jeremy Ubanet Musango, Kevin May, and the last one is Ulrich Eneme Ella. So yes, all of those players just making the preliminary squad. And let's talk about the starting position then. So we are going to put Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang as a likely starter. We're tempted to say definite, but we'll tell you why we don't. And for first backup, we have Dennis Bouanga. But let me tell you, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang overcame problems with the team. Actually, he had announced his retirement in 2022, but came back to the team in June of 2024. However, he only started half of the games. His replacement were mostly out-of-position players. We can't really identify one strongly, but we would say Dennis Bouanga seems the most logical. I don't exactly know why. I'm trying to justify why I have Dennis Bouanga on there, because he didn't really play the forward position that much more than some of the other people. In fact, one of the forwards who appeared as much as him was Orfe Mbina in the early part of the period, but Mbina was not selected for the final squad. Nevertheless, aside from all that, given Aubameyang's reputation, it's hard to see him not starting in the Cup. I think people would be pretty shocked. He did start 2 of the September-October 2025 games, so 2 of the 4 games there. He didn't start the first one, and in the third one, he scored 4 goals against Zambia. But he also got a red card, which prevented him from starting the last one. And maybe that's where I'm getting Bouanga's name there, because he started that game, their last game in October. Aubameyang, though, was available to start the November playoff game, and so he did. And so Boanga and Aubameyang, that is the combination they want to have on the field, I'm sure. But if Aubameyang's not available, I'm thinking Boanga is the most likely backup for the position. So, shall we give Aubameyang 2 stars or 3? Well, I think if he's fit, they will definitely choose him. And so I'm going to give 3 stars, but I'm a bit doubtful, more like 2.5 there for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. We don't see any of the other forwards really as potentially starting ahead of him, is what I'm trying to say. Although Malik Avuna is an interesting candidate there, having been a starter in 2 cups in the past. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our look at the candidates, and we are going to move on to section 3 and our spotlight review. That's what we begin with. We want to welcome listeners to the short version here of the mediacast, and let's talk about our spotlight review. That's a race through the squad, reviewing what we've covered, really what we've covered throughout parts 1 and 2. In part 1, we kind of compiled the list here and placed players according to their likelihood of reaching the final squad. And then in part 2, we were able to say who did make the final squad and the preliminary squad. And we made predictions as to who the starters were going to be. So let's start with the manager there, Thierry Moyuma. Has been in charge basically since for the whole period that we looked at. That's roughly the last 2 years, and he will lead them through this cup. So we treat him as if he is a selection for the final squad. For goalkeepers, we had a definite candidate in Lois Mbaba, who was selected, and then likely candidate Francois Bacale, also selected for the final squad. We had 3 candidates at the possible level. Only among them, Anse Ngubi Demba was selected for the final squad. The other 2 didn't even make the preliminary squad. Surprisingly, in the case of Junior Fotso Nubi, but also Lucas Munguenu, neither of them making the preliminary squad. Our seemingly off the squad player did make it, but we're only going to talk about players at the possible level or above here, unless they made the squad, so as not to overcomplicate things. So in terms of starters, we concluded that Lois Mbaba was the definite starter there. On to defence, and we had 2 candidates at the definite level, both of them making the final cut. That is Bruno Ekwel-Manga and Aaron Apindangoye, both of them selected. Our 2 likely candidates were also selected, Michel Mbula and Mick Omphia. And the first of our possible candidates also made the cut. That is Alex Mukatu Musunda. However, we had another candidate at the possible level, Yanis Mbemba, and he only made the preliminary squad there. We do have one new candidate on the list who was selected for the final squad. We actually had 3 candidates, but only one of them made the final squad, and that is Jonathan Domarcolino, making the final cut there. So we have 6 central defenders here, and that's pretty much what teams usually bring. In terms of starters, we think Bruno Ekwel-Manga, despite being, I think it was 37 years old, we think he's the definite starter there. We're not so sure about his partner, though, so we gave 1 star to Aaron Apindangoye to represent him as a possible starter, and the other one, we think Mick Omphia is a possible starter in central defence there. Let's go to the left-back position. We had a definite candidate in Jacques Ekomi. Jacques Ekomi was selected for the final squad. So was our likely candidate, Johan Obiang. And those are the only two. And between the two of them, we think Jacques Ikome is likely to start. Johan Obiang, just a possible starter there. Although we wouldn't be shocked to see Obiang starting in a different position on the field. Over to right backs. Here too, we only have two candidates, and they are twins. It's Anthony Oyono and Jeremy Oyono. And we think Anthony is the likely starter there. Jeremy, though, a possible starter. Up we go to defensive midfielders. We have a definite candidate in Mario Lemina, who was selected for the final squad. Two candidates at the possible level, Serge Junior Unguali. Serge Junior Unguali only making the preliminary squad there. But our other possible candidate, Clench Lufilu making the final cut there. We also have a new candidate named to the preliminary squad who was selected, and that is Samake Nzebanama making the cut there. Before we look at starters, we will talk about central midfielders here, and we have at the definite level Gwailor Kanga. Gwailor Kanga was selected for the final squad. So were the two likely candidates on our list here, Andre Biogopoko and Didier Ndong. All three of those, Kanga, Biogopoko and Ndong, selected for the final squad. Now we can talk about potential starters, and that is actually a very solid trio in the midfield. And so we think it's likely that Gwailor Kanga, Didier Ndong, and Mario Lemina will be the starters there in a three-man midfield. Okay, let's move on upfield. We're just going to pause at right midfielders because we did have a possible candidate coded as a right midfielder. It's Teddy Averland, and he was selected for the final squad. Now we go up to left attacking midfielders. I'm kind of waiting for my graphics to behave properly here. And we have a definite candidate in... Oh, well, I'm all over the place here. We have a definite candidate in Dennis Buanga, and really just he's the only candidate over here, although we have seen some of the right attacking midfielders starting on this side. Nevertheless, we consider Dennis Buanga a definite starter, probably on this side, but potentially could start as a forward if Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is for some reason not available. Anyway, Dennis Buanga, we think a definite starter. Over to the right side, where things are much less clear, we have a likely candidate in Jim Alavina, and he was selected for the final squad, and two possible candidates, David Zambisa, not selected for the final squad, just the preliminary squad for him, and Xavi Babika, who did make the final cut. However, both Alavina and Babika are kind of at the end of injuries, so they are recovered, but we think both of them may not be fit enough to start. We'll talk about that a little later when we get to the injury situation. They do have a new candidate over here, an interesting one, Royce Openda. And he was given the start in the November playoff game, a very important game, right in the center of midfield. And that was his debut game. So that was pretty interesting. Royce Openda on the squad, and we'll see what role he plays in the cup. In terms of predictions here, though, we were unable to make a prediction as to who would be the starter on the right side. Actually, Royce Openda is looking quite possible there. Central attackers, they really don't use this position that much. It's only used in a 4-2-3-1 formation, and they only used that in one of their 18 games over the period. So we're going to predict that they're not going to use this position. Nevertheless, we did have a couple of candidates here. The first one at the likely level is really the only surprise non-selection. It's Noha Lamina, brother of Mario Lamina, quite a bit younger brother, who we thought was likely to be selected actually, but only named to the preliminary squad. Meanwhile, the possible candidate, Eric Bokum, was selected for the final squad there. And our last category is forwards. Here we have definite candidate Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who was selected for the final squad. And then we had three candidates at the possible level. The first one, Alan Do Marcolino, older brother of the Jonathan Do Marcolino, who we saw was selected. However, Alan was not. Just made the preliminary squad there. Our second possible candidate, Edlin Ramdi Isang Matuti, was selected for the final squad, but the third possible candidate, Brian Mayo Ngua, not even selected for the preliminary squad there. And we do have a new candidate here. Again, not a new player. He's actually been around for quite a while. Malik Mvuna, we call him new because he hadn't appeared for the squad over the past couple of years, so he wasn't on our list for part one. But Malik Mvuna making a comeback here, named to the final squad, and we only have three forwards here, so we're a bit thin in the offensive end of the field, I would say. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Malik Mvuna at least subbed in to a game. However, our prediction there is we would be shocked if Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang wasn't the starter. So we think he will be the definite starter there. All right, that brings us to the end of the Spotlight review. So we're going to do a couple of other kind of summary things here. The first one is to just review the surprises on the list here. And I just got to find my spot. Okay, so really the only notable non-selections. Yes, the only one really there is Lamina Noha. We thought he was a likely candidate there. He's an attacking midfielder. We thought he was likely, but only made the preliminary squad there. Unexpected inclusions. Well, I'm going to put Malik Mvuna, the forward, on the list here. Technically, he's a new player. Because we hadn't covered him in part one. The reason we hadn't covered him is we only put players on the list who had appeared in 2024 and 2025. Malik Mvuna last appeared for the national team in November of 2019, so really coming back in from a long absence from the team. However, he was a starter in the 2015 and 2017 African Cups and is still only 33 years old, but very surprising to see him called back in after such a long time. And then new players, well, Malik Mvuna, kind of one of them, but we have Jonathan Do Marcolino, the central defender. He's just 19 years old. Next, we have Royce Openda making a big debut there in the playoff game. He's 23 years old. And the other one is defensive midfielder Samake Nze Bangnama, a 23-year-old player that came off of the preliminary squad. All right, let's talk about injuries then. We have a bit to deal with here. And if you're looking at the YouTube, we have the list as it was at the end of part one. So we have Jim Avellina there as recovered from injury. He was out with a calf injury for the October games, but has since returned to play for his club. He actually was recovered by the end of October, but between then and now, he's only played 7 minutes for his club. In fact, he was only called up for 2 games by his club on December 7th and December 12th, and he was not called up for Gabon's November game either. So really hasn't played much, and we think fitness will be an issue there. We don't think he's going to be a starter. Nevertheless, he was selected for the squad, and so we're gonna put him as an injury doubt down here. He still may need some playing time there. Next, at the close call level, we had Mario Lemina. So Mario Lemina had been out with muscle problems, a fairly recent injury since mid-December 2025. And he had been expected back on December 22nd, so that was a pretty close call. He was out injured for the last game for his club on December 13th, but he was named to the squad here, as in he wasn't withdrawn or replaced or anything like that. So Mario Lemina, again, we're going to say a bit of an injury doubt. He may not be fully ready to start the first game there. Also a close call was Xavi Babika, the right attacking midfielder. And Xavi Babika had been out with a broken fibula from early October 2025. That sounds very serious, very long term, but actually he did return to play for his club on December 12th. But he only played 13 minutes and was not on the squad for any of the following games there. So even if he is recovered from the injury, like Alavina, we don't think he'll necessarily have the fitness to start. So we're going to put him also in the injury doubt level, even though all of these players were selected. The last one was an unknown situation. It was central defender Michel Mbula. He had been out with a hamstring injury since August, and that injury was perhaps exacerbated by playing half of a game in late September, after which he returned to the injury list. So at the end of part one, it was an unknown return date. His hamstring injury lasted right up until the start of the tournament, but he was selected for the final squad, so we're guessing that they had judged him close to recovery. But again, here's a case where he hadn't played any games for his club, in his case since September. So another case where it seems like he would need time to build fitness before he could really play. So we'll also put Michel Mbola as an injury doubt. So that is all four of our injury ones. Still under a bit of question as to whether they'll be fit to play. Anyway, that is it for the injury list. I'm going to just see if we have any new injuries, and thankfully for Gabon there are none. No new injuries. Closing thoughts for Gabon. Well, Gabon is a small, tight team. That's going to be their advantage against bigger teams with bigger club affiliations. But this is a small team. They're used to playing together with each other. But these injuries would really hurt if they can't. If these players can't start, because Gabon doesn't really have a lot of bench strength. Even though they're basically their starting 15 players or so have performed very well. So I think those injuries will be important for Gabon. Having said that, they did reach the they passed the group stage, and they did very well in the 2021 African Cup, even though Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Mario Lemina were both unavailable there. So they do manage to get through. Anyway, kind of undermining my own thesis there. That's it for closing thoughts. Let's move to the conclusion here, the closing graphic. And thank you for joining us here for Gabon. And we hope we see you for our next team. We would like to thank Pixabay and Cold Fingers for the wonderful music used in this mediacast. The title of the piece is Eid Mubarak.